Hey, what's going on guys? Legendary Ocelot here, and I'm back for another video. Today, I'm making a guide on how to max out all of your gear in Hypixel Skyblock. I have tips that help you if you are in the early game with basic gear, or even hypermaxing your Necron armor and Valkyrie. Swords are your main asset in most situations, and any melee weapon, even mage weapons like the Bonzo Staff and the Spirit Scepter, are swords. Since swords mainly depend on strength and critical damage in order to deal damage, you will want a reforge that benefits those. If you need critical damage without giving up too much strength, go for Fabled, otherwise go for Withered. If you can't afford either of those reforges, go for Spicy if you don't need the critical chance, or if you do need the critical chance, go for Sharp. The Dirty reforge is underrated and works well with Ferocity builds. An exception is if you have a mage weapon, then go for Heroic, as the reforge is better suited for mage as it gives you more intelligence. Another thing you want is to consider hot potato books. Here is how you apply them. Plus 20 damage and plus 20 strength. Nice. For anything worse than an AOTE or Raider Axe, it's not worth the 400,000 coin bizarre price for 10 hot potato books. But for said weapons or better, it is definitely worth it, as the 20 damage and 20 strength is better than it seems, and can make the difference on things like one-tapping Zealots and grinding tier 3 Slayers. For recombobulating, it is only worth it on late game weapons like the Livid Dagger, Giant Sword, and Valkyrie. But on a good weapon, it can be really good for the 6 mil price tag. Same for Fuming Potato Books, as although expensive, can be good on a late game weapon. Also, if the sword is a dungeon weapon you want to use it in dungeons, 5-starring it is very important, as it will give you a 50% stat boost on the item in dungeons. For ultimate enchantments, combo sucks. Ultimate-wise, it's good for weapons with abilities, like any mage weapons or the Flower of Truth. But do not put it on a Livid Dagger, which for some reason a lot of people do, with reasoning unknown, but it is dumb. Ultimate Jerry is the best on aspect of the Jerry, nothing else. Swarm is a good budget ultimate enchant for berserkers and tanks, as it helps with crowd control. Soul Eater is the best ultimate enchantment in most situations, although in certain situations, endgame players can really use Chimera, which will sometimes be slightly better. One for All at the current moment is really good, especially for weapons like the Emerald Blade, Reaper Scythe, and Giant Sword, but I would use it with caution, because other than not having enchantments like Lifesteal, it also runs the risk of getting nerfed. For regular enchantments, get all of them other than Knockback, as Knockback can ruin your combos. For conflicting enchantments, get Smite if you know you're doing dungeons. Otherwise, get Sharpness unless the sword is a Scorpion foil, which then you would get Bane of Arthropods. Execute is better than Prosecute, and for one-tapping mobs, First Strike is better. But for bosses, Triple Strike is better. If it is your jack-of-all-trades sword, then go get First Strike. Giant Killer is much better than Titan Killer, and unless the weapon is a mage weapon, go for Siphon over Lifesteal or Mana Steal. If it is a mage weapon, however, if you have trouble surviving, get Lifesteal. If you don't, get Mana Steal. Finally, Thunderlord is better than Thunderbolt. For the choice between Tier 5, Tier 6, and Tier 7 enchants, it depends on the weapon. If the weapon is the absolute best in the game, and you have money to burn, and you know you will use the weapon for a long time, get the Tier 7 books. If the weapon is good, and you want good enchants, but don't want to spend 100 plus mil on enchants, then get Tier 6 books. Otherwise, just get the standard Tier 5 books. Books you will want in the late game, but I would skip in the earlier mid game, would be Vicious, Dragon Hunter, and any tier 6 or tier 7 books other than Critical 6. If you're doing dungeons, Smite 6, and other cheap tier 6 books. Armor is going to be your main tool to not die in tough situations, so having good armor is just as important as having a good weapon. For reforges, if you are an archer or berserker, use Ancient, or in certain situations Renowned, although most of the time Ancient is better. If you're poor, use Pure or Fierce. As a mage, get Necrotic on all armor pieces except the chestplate, or you should get Loving on it instead. If you are poor, just put Wise on the whole set. As healer or tank, if you have low HP, use Giant. And if you have low defense, use Perfect or Reinforced. If you're poor, just use Titanic or Heavy. At mid-game or later, Hot Potato books are good as well for bolstering your EHP, but this isn't for early game players, as fully Hot Potato booking all 4 pieces of an armor set will cost 1.6 mil from the bazaar at the moment, for 160 HP and 80 defense. For recombobulating, I would not recommend it for any set worse than Shadow Assassin or Superior Dragon, but for the late game it can be really good. Same for Fuming Potato books, as although it is very expensive, it can bolster your EHP even more. If the set is a dungeon set, 5-star, or start as much as you can. There are several ultimate enchantments for armor. Whoever thought of the idea for Bank and No Pain No Gain should be fired, as they both are literally useless. For mages, Wisdom is the best. Just remember to have experience points or it won't work. Last Stand is good for tanks, or if you have trouble surviving, as the bug of them only giving you a tiny bit of defense is fixed. For berserkers and archers, Legion is by far the best, but it is also very expensive. I suggest not getting ultimate enchantments during the early game, and for mid-game stick to level 3 books. Only at late game it will be worth it to get tier 5 ultimate enchantments. For regular enchantments, get all of them, as Thorns is no longer bad. For Mastiff armor, get Fire Protection, otherwise get Protection. Deathstrider is better than Frostwalker, and Rejuvenate is better than Respite. If you're rich, get True Protection, and if you wish, books like Sugar Rush and Smarty Pants. For tier 5, tier 6, and tier 7 books, if the set is the best in the game and you can afford it, get tier 7 books. If you're on somewhat of a budget or maxing a set like Necromancer Lord or Shadow Assassin, get tier 6 books. Otherwise, just get tier 5 books. Bows are your secondary weapon, or primary if you're an archer. For reforges, Spiritual is by far the best, although Precise is a good one if you can't quite afford Spiritual. On a budget, get Unreal or Rapid on it. For Terminator, always get Hasty. Hot Potato books are again worth it if the bow is decent. No, I'm not talking about the decent bow, and you can afford it. I wouldn't recombobulate the bow unless it's a Last Breath, Juju, or Terminator. I also wouldn't Fuming Potato book the bow unless it is a really good bow like the previously mentioned ones. For ultimate enchants, you only really have 2 options, Rend and Soul Eater. Usually Soul Eater is better, especially for short bows, but Rend can have some niche uses. For regular enchantments, with the exception of Punch, you will want every enchantment. Dragon Hunter and Overload are really good, but don't sell all your items just to get these. And no, Infinite Quiver does not reduce bow damage, so use it. For Power 5, 6, or 7, only use Power 7 if the weapon is a Terminator, and only use Power 6 if the weapon is a late game bow, like a Juju, Last Breath, or maybe a Spirit Bow. For mining tools, make sure you get the right reforge. For Pickaxes and Drills, for endgame, Auspicious is the best, although Fleet is better for mining speed. For budget reforges, if the rarity is legendary or higher, use Fleet. If the rarity is epic or below, use Ambered. If on a strict budget, just use Fruitful. For the Pioneer Pickaxe or a Stonk, use the Refined Reforge, as it will give you more mining XP, good for looting minions. If you can afford it, get the Compact enchantment. For using the Silex for high efficiency levels, only use it on the best drills. Otherwise, just get efficiency 5. Don't forget Fortune, and if you can afford it, get Pristine. Do not get Silk Touch or Smelting Touch unless you know you want it. For farming tools, you will want Blessed on your hoes, and for axes, get Toil or Moil if on a budget. For hoes, you will not want to forget Harvesting and any turbo crop books you need. Unless you're farming wood, pumpkins, melons, sugarcane, or cactus, get Replenish. It is kinda expensive, but you will thank me later. If you can afford it, get Cultivating. For axes, get Efficiency. If it is a farming axe, get Replenish and the turbo crop books you need. For fishing rod reforges, get Lucky. Or if on a budget, Salty or any normal sword reforge. For enchantments, get all your fishing enchantments. And if you can afford it, get Expertise. Get the highest level books that you need and are reasonable for the rod. For talismans, a good damage setup is as follows. Strong on mythics and legendaries and shaded on the rest, or a mix of forceful and hurtful if you're poor. For good attack speed as well as damage, get strong on mythics and legendaries, strange on epics and uncommons, shaded, forceful, or hurtful on rares, and bloody on commons. For mages, get bizarre on all talismans, or demonic if you don't want to lose too much damage. For tanks, get shiny or pleasant on all rarities. Only recombobulate talismans if at endgame. In conclusion, you should max out your gear, but in a way where you don't spend too much money, unless you want to spend a lot of money. There are good ways to max out your gear even at early game. Have a good day, and see you in the next one.